Do you know what marked a significant escalation in the conflict in the Jammu and Kashmir region in December 1947? Picture this. The year is 1947, and tension is rising in the Jammu and Kashmir region. The month of December sees a notable increase in enemy activity, with the Indian line of communication between Jammu and Jhanger becoming a prime target. This aggression reaches a boiling point on December 24th, when the enemy captures Jhanger, dealing a strategic blow to the Indian forces. This loss compromises the Indian line of communication, setting the stage for even fiercer battles. 2 days later, on December 26th, a determined but unsuccessful attack is launched on Nowshera. Despite the failure, it underscores the enemy's capacity for large-scale assaults. Meanwhile, in the Uri sector, an estimated 4,000 to 6,000 raiders are operating, employing sophisticated methods of warfare. The loss of Jhanger was a significant turning point, marking an escalation in the conflict. From December 10th onwards, there was a notable increase in enemy activity. This was particularly evident along the vulnerable Indian line of communication stretching between Jammu and Jhanger. As tensions escalated, these strategic locations bore the brunt of concentrated enemy attacks. The goal was clear: disrupt India's communication lines and create chaos within the ranks of the Indian forces. This period marked a significant shift in the dynamics of the conflict. The enemy forces, emboldened and relentless, were on the offensive, releasing a wave of aggression that would soon culminate in a pivotal moment of the conflict: the capture of Jhanger. The Indian forces, though prepared for conflict, were grappling with the intensity and scale of the enemy's onslaught. The line of communication, the lifeline of the Indian forces, was under severe threat. This aggressive action set the stage for the capture of Jhanger. On December 24th, the enemy's aggression culminated in the capture of Jhanger. This marked a turning point in the conflict, as the loss of Jhanger held deep strategic implications for the Indian forces. Jhanger was not just any outpost, it was a vital cog in the Indian line of communication between Jammu and Jhanger. The enemy, recognizing this, had focused their assaults on this critical juncture, ultimately resulting in its capture. Now, with Jhanger under enemy control, the Indian forces found themselves in a precarious position. Their line of communication had been compromised, which meant that their ability to coordinate and respond to enemy actions was significantly hampered. This was a situation that demanded immediate attention and swift action, for the stakes were high and the margin for error was slim. The loss of Jhanger compromised the Indian line of communication, marking a significant setback. On December 26th, the enemy forces launched a fierce attack on Nowshera. This marked the enemy's dogged determination and capacity for large-scale assaults, even though this particular attack was unsuccessful. This was more than a mere show of force. It was a clear message of their intent to not back down, to not yield. The situation in the Uri sector was particularly intense. Here, the enemy boasted a force of between 4,000 to 6,000 raiders. These weren't just ragtag groups of rebels or insurgents. Many of these raiders wore serge battle dress, and they were organized, disciplined, and well-equipped. Among them were elements from Pakistan's South Waziristan scouts, led by professional soldiers. This was no ordinary enemy, this was a formidable adversary. These raiders employed sophisticated methods of warfare. They relied on a large number of 3-inch mortars, a weapon known for its destructive power and its ability to rain down terror from afar. Their tactics were not just about brute force, but also about causing fear and chaos among the ranks of their opponents. But it wasn't just about the number of raiders or the kind of weaponry they possessed. The very fact that they were operating within the Uri sector, a strategically important region, added to the gravity of the situation. The Uri sector was a crucial line of communication, and its loss would have severely compromised the Indian forces' ability to coordinate and respond to enemy actions. The enemy's presence in the Uri sector was a clear and present danger to the Indian forces. It was not just a threat to their immediate safety, but also a challenge to their strategic objectives. The raiders' tactics, their numbers, and their location all combined to create a complex and challenging scenario for the Indian forces. In the Uri sector, the enemy employed sophisticated methods of warfare, posing a significant threat to the Indian forces. This wasn't just a battle for territory. This was a test of resolve, strategy, and the ability to adapt in the face of a formidable enemy. The Uri garrison was composed of various units, each with a distinct role and responsibility. Among them, Headquarters 161 Brigade served as the command center, orchestrating the defense and strategically coordinating the troops. Squadron 7 Cavalry, with its armored vehicles and heavy weaponry, provided the much-needed firepower. The infantry companies were the backbone of the garrison. These included 1 Sikh, 4 Kumaon, and 1 Para Kumaon. The soldiers from these units were trained for close combat and operated in some of the toughest terrains. They were the first line of defense, holding the fort against the enemy onslaught. But an army is not just about the soldiers on the front line. It also requires a strong support system to ensure its effective functioning. At Uri, this support came in the form of artillery units. Their long-range firepower could neutralize threats even before they reached the front lines. Additionally, the engineering support played a crucial role in fortifying defenses and maintaining infrastructure. The garrison also included artillery and engineering support, providing a robust defense against enemy attacks. The Indian forces at Uri undertook defensive actions to repel enemy attacks and maintain control of the area. In a strategic response to the escalating enemy aggression, the Indian forces initiated a series of defensive measures. One of the primary actions involved the regrouping of troops. This tactical maneuver allowed for a strengthened defensive formation, providing a robust shield against the enemy onslaught. The troops were not merely repositioned, they were also tasked with reinforcing the perimeter defenses. Fortifying these defenses was crucial to maintaining the integrity of the Uri sector. The soldiers worked tirelessly, erecting barriers and setting up defensive installations. Their efforts were akin to constructing an impenetrable fortress, one that would stand firm in the face of the enemy's relentless attacks. However, the Indian forces knew that a strong defense wasn't merely about holding ground. It was also about engaging the enemy and preventing them from gaining any further foothold. This led to a series of skirmishes and battles where the Indian forces took on the enemy head-on. These engagements were fierce, testing the mettle of every soldier on the battlefield. In the face of a numerically superior enemy, the Indian forces displayed remarkable resilience and courage. They didn't just defend their positions, they went on the offensive. The Indian forces conducted successful counterattacks that pushed back the enemy, undermining their momentum and disrupting their advance. These counterattacks were strategically executed, targeting key enemy positions and causing significant casualties. Each counterattack was a blow to the enemy, a clear message that the Indian forces were not to be underestimated. Despite the enemy's numerical advantage, the Indian forces held their ground, proving that numbers alone do not determine the outcome of a battle. Defensive actions were not just about physical fortifications or tactical maneuvers. They were also about the spirit of resistance, the will to fight, and the determination to protect one's land. The Indian forces embodied this spirit, standing as a bulwark against the enemy's aggression. Despite facing a numerically superior enemy, the Indian forces conducted successful counterattacks. While the Indian forces achieved success in repelling enemy attacks and conducting counterattacks, they also faced challenges and suffered casualties. In the high-intensity conflict that was unfolding, the Indian forces grappled with the Herculean task of maintaining supply lines. The strategic location of Jhanger, now in enemy hands, made this a daunting endeavor. The lifeline that connected Jammu to Jhanger, the Indian line of communication, was now compromised. This disruption posed a significant challenge, as it became increasingly difficult to deliver much-needed supplies and reinforcements to the front lines. Defending vulnerable positions was another obstacle that the Indian forces had to navigate. The fall of Jhanger had exposed other areas to the enemy's aggression, making them susceptible to attacks. The stakes were high, with the Indian forces having to devote substantial resources to fortify these delicate positions and keep the enemy at bay. But perhaps the most relentless challenge was the determined assaults by the enemy forces. Despite facing setbacks, the enemy continued to mount large-scale attacks, demonstrating a level of tenacity that kept the Indian forces constantly on their toes. The attack on Nowshera on December 26th was a stark reminder of the enemy's unwavering resolve to seize control. In the face of these challenges, the Indian forces also suffered casualties. The loss of brave soldiers was a grim reality of the conflict. Each loss was a blow to the morale of the troops, a reminder of the high price of war, and a testament to the courage and sacrifice of those who fought to defend their land. Overall, the loss of Jhanger and the increased enemy activity in the Uri sector posed significant challenges for the Indian forces, requiring them to adapt their strategies and tactics to effectively counter the enemy threat. These challenges and losses were not just mere episodes in the conflict, but were integral to shaping the course of the conflict and the tactics employed by the Indian forces.